Hey, I'm Alex Mackliffe from Board Game Co, and today we are continuing our top 100, today with 60 through 51. By the time you're done with this video, we will officially be halfway through the top 100 games of all time as of 2023. You can see my list criteria of how and what and where and some small rules around the list at the beginning of the very first video. This will all be part of a playlist. You can go ahead and check that out. And throughout my top 100, I am running a channel support drive. I'll include a link to that video as well, with an opportunity to also win a few all-ins such as Oathsworn, Master of the Universe, and Zombicide Undead or Alive. And with that, let's go ahead and start us off with our number 60 game of all time. And this is a small box game, but it packs a bit of a punch, and that's going to be Radlands. Radlands from Roxley Games is a game that I was dismissive of when I first saw this game. I thought it looked cool, make no mistake. I mean, it's Roxley. Their games look phenomenal to begin with. This was no exception. The art, the presentation, the graphic design, all the things here looked absolutely incredible. But whatever, it's a two-player head-to-head game. These are a dime a dozen, and it's just all card-based. There are so many games like this that come out every single year that I couldn't help but not be impressed, I guess. I was like, whatever, you know. It'll come out, it's nice, but also it was like $35 or possibly as much as $60 if you got the whole whatever for a small card game. Turns out this thing is worth it. This is a really solid game that gives you amazing gameplay, incredible back and forth. This is consistently a great experience as far as the deck management, the hand management, the shared deck aspects, so you don't have to worry about building out your own custom deck. You're dealing with a shared pool of cards, but it's how you play those cards. It's which bases you structure. You're going to start with 3 unique bases, and your goal is to survive, have your bases survive longer than your opponents. But Radlands gives you a consistently good time with a tight amount of decision space, with a lot of knowing when to hold them, when to play them as you go through the game. That's going to be Radlands from Roxley Games as my number 60 game of all time. My number 59 is going to be a much bigger box, and what I'm showing you today is only one of several boxes I have in my collection, and that's going to be Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape. And no, I will not be showing you the bottom of this box because there's loose miniatures in here and I don't want to mess around with them. But Massive Darkness 2 is coming to you from Command Games, and it's going to be their, well, second venture into the Massive Darkness universe. They came out with Massive Darkness quite some time ago, and for a long time there was always questions as to will there be a Massive Darkness 2? Will there be a rehashing of a system that was both loved but also loved with a lot of critical feedback along the way? And turns out, years later, they woke up one day and said, hey, here you go, here's Massive Darkness 2, we're actually going to give you this game, but it's going to build on the core mechanics of the just a dice-rolling dungeon crawler that was Massive Darkness, but with a whole lot more things, including an actually fleshed out campaign. I say that having not actually played through it, so I don't know if it's actually better yet, but supposedly it's better, with a whole lot of asymmetric characters. A big part of the hook of the game is that every single character comes with their own minigame of how they operate within the dungeon, and they're going to bring their own flavor, whether it's deck building, push your luck, whether it's action management, resource management, whatever things are going on as you manage your own different character and their own little puzzle that they have in terms of how they operate to achieve their goals, and then going with the just general dice chucking goodness of trying to take down a dungeon full of various enemies as you slowly but progressively make your way through more and more challenging scenarios. There's an absolute ton of content for this game. I have a lot of fun with this one. That's Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape, my number 59 game of all time. Coming in at 58, we have another small box, but again, packing a lot of a punch, and this is going to be Chip Theory Games 20 Strong. 20 Strong brings you, well, the smallest Chip Theory game that's actually good. There are other small chip theory games, but they're not as well received. I don't particularly enjoy them, and I don't think they're generally that well received. But Chip Theory finally came back to the table with 20 Strong this past year and said, hey, it's been a while. We have a big passionate fan base. We have a lot of people who like our games, but there's a lot of people out there who can't try a chip theory game because the price point just puts it out of reach, out of anything who's like anyone who wants to spend a mediocre amount of money, a modicum of money, a reasonable amount of money on your games. They're just out of that range. And 20 Strong comes along and says, hey, here's a $20 base game, a bunch of small expansions. You can go ahead and see whether a chip theory game is right for you and see the quality and the presentation and the gameplay behind one of our games in a much more reasonable price point. And 20 Strong brings you that in a solo game with a core set and then a variety of decks to add into that core set using the same components from the core set to keep price affordable while giving you new decks and playstyles to go through them. 20 Strong basically has you rolling a bunch of dice and using those dice across a series of challenges to slowly get to the boss to eventually defeat them. But you have to manage your dice because you're constantly spending dice. So you have to build up a tableau of abilities that will have you bringing back enough dice so that what you're expending versus bringing in balances out to the point that you're actually able to make your way through these challenges. Gives you 3 different gameplays because there's the Solar Sentinels deck, the Hoplomachus deck, and the Too Many Bones deck, and they all give you slight nuanced differences as far as how they operate, as far as how they play, and overall 20 strong just gives you an incredible amount of decision space in a very small and relatively affordable package. That's going to be 20 strong, my number 58 of all time. Let's stack this on top of here. My number 57 is going to be, again, a much bigger box over here, although I'm realizing I stacked 2 boxes out of order here, which is going to be a slight problem. My number 57, I'm tempted to just rearrange the order, but we're not going to do that. Give me a second while I yank. My number 57 is going to be Lancaster. Lancaster from Queen Games is an oldie but a goodie, and I specifically have the big box of this game. This is not one of those well-known titles you're going to see across the board. This, like El Grande as well, are older titles that are known about to an extent, but not as well known. It's just, and I think Lancaster in particular, I think El Grande has more of a general renown to it, whereas Lancaster is one of those games that you may have seen, you may have heard of, but it's such a ridiculously good experience. This is worker placement with upgraded workers. You're going to be upgrading your workers. I'm worried it's going to happen when I flip this box over. You're going to be upgrading your workers as you go through the game. You're playing on the central map over here. You have your own private tableau over here. And then a few things are going on. You have workers who are going to spots. You're upgrading the strength of those workers so you can bump people out of the spots, and tactically knowing when and how to place a worker that you want to be bumped out versus placing a worker that you're going to bump someone out is a big part of the game. Meanwhile, you're voting on the various laws that are going to come into play because the players all have to join together to vote on what laws are going to enter the game because those laws will benefit some players more than others. You don't want to be the odd one out because then no one's going to vote with you, but you also want to make sure you're voting towards things that will actually favor you in the game, which lends itself to a nice little puzzle of trying to optimize around the gameplay, the building of your workers, the building of your base, and the laws you're voting on. And there's a whole lot of expansion content in this box. It's a great game. I don't table it often enough, but it is a great game. That's going to be number 57 is Lancaster. Now the giant box number 56 that I yanked this out from underneath because I accidentally stacked in the wrong order is going to be Mosaic Colossus Edition. The most annoying thing about this box is if you've seen the retail edition of this game, if you've seen the regular version, this is a gigantic box, but it does come with a very nice presentation. But this Mosaic is going to be a tableau building game that's been compared to a 4X, sort of, but not really. It's compared to Terraforming Mars. I hear the comparisons, but they feel very different. But in Mosaic, you're taking one of, I believe, 8 different actions. The actions are pretty simple and straightforward, but they're all about, you know, building a wonder, building a city, going ahead and grabbing a technology, cashing in on tariffs. Ultimately, you're operating on a world board that feels like area control. That's not true. It looks like area control, but it doesn't feel like area control. It's more like, you know, hey, we're placing things down. We're trying to score points. We're trying to place next to other stuff. We're building wonders that will score us points. It's a very abstracted central map, but there's a whole bunch of cards you're building out and ways to upgrade your tableau so that whenever you take an action, you're suddenly producing 17 wheat instead of 3 wheat when you start the game. You're trying to balance so many different facets, but ultimately the game moves very quickly as players take actions very quickly. You're going to have a lot of ways to add or modify to the gameplay. Overall, Mosaic gives you a delightful experience that to me works well at 2. It works better at 3 and 4, but even works well as a 2-player game. I don't even remember if this is solo mode. There might be. I have not played it solo, so I don't know. But Mosaic is going to be a number 56 game of all time. A delightful experience. I have had a lot of fun with this one, and it's surprisingly easy to table, especially when you consider the heft of it. Some of the player boards are obnoxiously large, but the gameplay behind it is incredibly rewarding. Number 55 is going to be another oldie but a goodie. We have a nice mix of things going on in today's video, but we're going to have Trois as my number 55 is going to be Trois. Now I'm trying to remember what metal coins I have in here because that was a nice little jingle, and I have a nice little insert here, but I don't remember what metal coins I put in here. I heard metal coins. They're underneath. This is going to be annoying. Give me a second while I get distracted by my own game for a second. Ooh, these are nice metal coins. I haven't played this game in a few. Here we go. Here we go. These little coins over here. That's going to be what we have in the box. I totally forgot I'd upgraded this with those. Anyways, now that I've been distracted, Trois is an older game that is not as, again, well known nowadays, but there are a lot of players who have played this game, who have enjoyed this game. I believe it's even available on Board Game Arena if you want to give it a shot there, but Trois is a delightful dice placement game that doesn't reward you too well for rolling well because players can buy your dice from you. You roll a bunch of 6s, great, they're amazing. Now suddenly players are buying those dice from you, and you have money, but not the dice you needed, and you have to go ahead and resign yourself to working with their 2, which is yellow, and you don't even want a yellow die, and if you did want a yellow die, you want it to be better than a 2. The core game engine relies around playing cards that are going to give you ways to cash in dice for different benefits, but you need to first get an outpost on that on that card. I don't know if it's called an outpost. You need to get a presence on that card, and then from there you need to cash in the value of dice to be able to take the actions of that card. And it's all about trying to figure out which cards are in play. There's 9 cards in play, and which cards can you combine to take the right actions that you think you'll be able to work towards building up your tableau, building up your buildings, gathering more people, paying the taxes on those people, trying to have the right combinations of cards that will help you, trying to also defend these city walls from coming crashing down. Troll is a delightful game. I think the Ladies of Troll expansion adds just more variety to it. It's completely not essential if you're not playing this game a lot, but if you are playing this game a lot, it just adds more content to the game that just will mix up your experience even further. Troll is an oldie but a goodie. It's a great game. There's a reason I upgraded it. I'm excited to play it. I forgot I put those coins in there. I genuinely totally forgot. Coming in at number 54, we're going to have the second Command game on this list, and that's going to be Blood Rage. And Blood Rage is both an amazing game, and also if you've been following my list over the years, Blood Rage for a long time is my number 1 game of all time. I think for 2, maybe 3 years straight, this was my number 1 game of all time. So yes, it has fallen, but fallen does not mean I don't love it. I still love it. It's the same problem I have with Tenaris Adventures and Gloomhaven, where I've played this game so many times that by now I don't feel as charmed by the magnificence of how things are going to combine, because when you have 50 plays under your belt, there's only so much the game can give. Now, I do have the expansion content, which is nice. It does mix it up, but the same core mechanisms are present. Make no mistake, again, this is still my number 54 of all time. It has moved down. It's moved around. It has changed. It has shifted. But Blood Rage is one of the best area control games of all time. This one over here is going to give you a tight knife fight in a gun. Is the term knife fight in a phone booth? Is that the term? A knife fight in a phone booth mentality, as you're working with a central area, a bunch of surrounding areas, and a tiny little map in which you can easily get from one place to the next as you try to go ahead and put people onto the board and just engage in fights, trying to pillage the provinces one after another as you draft cards that are going to give you quests, going to give you abilities, going to give you combat cards. All these things are just designed to go ahead and appeal to, well, 7 different things you want to do every single turn, but meanwhile, you have to not only make that choice, but you have to know that whatever you don't choose is being passed to your player to your left, and you have to figure out how you're trying to build around those cards, around what you're being given, around what you take. There's so much nuance to the system, and there are so many ways to leverage the way things combine. This is a game that for a long time, I just dove straight into it and had a ton of fun with it. And then as I played it more, I started to try to find additional, not really adjacent strategy, so to speak, where I try to find something I hadn't leaned into and try to combine that card with that card and see how they did. And sometimes they didn't do so well, but other times I'd find new strategies that I'd overlooked just because of how much I wanted to explore the system. Blood Rage gives you great area control, it gives you incredible drafting, it gives you an amazingly good time. It is my number 54 game of all time, and again, for a long time, this is my number 1 game. It's just, you play a game enough and things do shift around. My number 53 is going to be City of Spies, Assault Rule 1942. City of Spies, this being the big box version, is a ridiculous mind game of placing your spies down onto a board in order to try to get the central reward of them. But it's a mind game because you're trying to think through how can you place things that help you, and what are your opponents going to do to try to mess with you. Because you're dealing with these 6 spots over here. You're going to have these 6 spots, and you're going to mix them up. They're going to be different spots, they're going to be rotated. But as you place things down, it counts not just for the strength, but also for the various abilities. You're going to be pulling spies from one section to another. You're going to be resolving abilities to assassinate other spies. You're going to be doing all these other things that are going to mess with the core system of the game to try to find ways to leverage your spies, your advantage, and your board presence or situation. The entire game comes down to a degree of hiddenness and openness, because some areas are going to be hidden, some areas are going to be open, but then trying to be mindful of what abilities are present on the board and on your agents, and where do you want to leverage your actual energies and attention, because you will not get everything, but depending on the scoring criteria in the game, different things will help you more so than others. So overall, City of Spies, it's one of those games, again, not as well known, not as well, like, all over the place, but I think it's a fantastic game. They did have a follow-up game, Planet Ship 1941 or something like that, or 2091. They had a different follow-up game that kind of used the same system but took it to space. It was a good game, but I think this the base game over here I think does it better, as well as just being more thematically accurate. But City of Spies is, if you like mind games, if you like control, if you like trying to read the table with, like, you know, 2, I would say it works best at 3 players, works well at 4, not as well at 2, but if you like being at a table with a few friends who are equally as into how they're going to mess you over across the course of an afternoon, City of Spies will absolutely deliver on that experience. My number 52 unintentionally, not planned, is our third Simon game of this list. They bundled up. They bundled up over here. I don't even know how many Simon games are in my top 100. I'll do that check later. I think we're at least at 4 now, because there's been 3 in this video alone, and my very first number 100 was Project Elite. I assume there's more to come, but Rum and Bones Second Tide is going to be my 52 game of all time. This is a game that I table maybe once or twice a year, and I have everything for this. I have all of Rum and Bones, I have all of Rum and Bones Season 1, I have the upgrade pack to make them all compatible. I have so many piratey goodness on my shelves that I do not need anywhere near enough of it, and reluctantly, if they ever brought it back to crowdfunding, I would still be backing the new content. This is one of my best 2-player experiences for when I actually have an hour and a half, 2 hours of just skirmish back and forth, what's the word for it, oh my gosh, a MOBA style gameplay. It's a MOBA style gameplay where you're going to have your core heroes, but they're going to have lanes of pirates just marching across from ship to ship, and the goal is to try to take down opponent's heroes, to try to get as many points as possible, to be mindful of the Kraken that's going to rear its ugly head sooner or later. But meanwhile, you ultimately get a lot more gold for defeating all the little minions wandering towards you, and so it's a delicate balance of, are you strong enough to jump onto your opposing pirate's ship, or will you be tackled and destroyed? When can you actually push the lane effectively, versus when do you have to resign yourself to dealing with the small little fodder that's headed your way, but does allow you to power up slowly but surely. This game feels like a MOBA game, and it gives you so much variety in heroes and simple yet accessible gameplay that to me it is such a good experience. I think Rum and Bones is fantastic. I think the first edition had some nitpicks or complaints that were resolved in the second edition fairly well. I was lucky enough to jump in at the second edition, but I did try playing it first edition rules like once or twice just to get a sense of it, and I see the complaints. But for me, second edition does an amazing job of giving you a MOBA style gameplay. To me, this is my favorite MOBA style gameplay from all of those out there, from Cloudspire, from Guards of Atlantis, from Skytier. This to me, Rum and Bones, gives me the best MOBA style gameplay, and specifically MOBA because what Cloudspire has its own aspects to it that make me appreciate that one a ton, but specifically when I'm looking for that MOBA feel, Rum and Bones delivers like no other game does. My number 51, which I have to reach somewhere around to go ahead and get over here, my number 51 game of all time is going to be Wild Assent. Wild Assent is a great game from Lazy Squire Games, and if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, Lazy Squire Games, I'm still waiting on my game, I'm still waiting on Storm Thunder, I hear you. I like their games, I like them as people, but I cannot in good conscience encourage you to back one of their games without being completely comfortable sitting in for a possibly very, 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 very long wait. But for me, Wild Assent started off that wait. It was already, when I got Wild Assent, it was one of my longest, most outstanding crowdfunding campaigns. And when I got it, to me, it delivered. It gave me an excellent experience as you take a bunch of seekers, hunters, and whatnot, going out into the wilds, trying to capture and or kill a bunch of monsters you're facing off against, while slowly building up and improving your tableau across 10 rounds of play. I think Wild Assent is reasonably accessible. Well, I should rephrase. If you have an updated rulebook, it is reasonably accessible. I do think the first edition rulebook was definitely not the best. It left you, you had a lot of room to basically either make up your own rules to fill in the gaps, or alternatively go onto forums to try to hunt things down. And so you did have to deal with that in the first edition. But ultimately, the gameplay itself, if you're willing to persevere past the first game, and I say that very, very key, because to me, playing a single game of Wild Assent does not show you the promise of how this game iterates as you go through multiple sessions in a row. That first game, you have whatever bare bones abilities, you don't have a ton of agency about how you've built things up, and so you walk in, and there is still fun gameplay to be had in the first game. But to me, if I was ranking it based on the first game alone, it would be a 3 out of 5. It's fun, it's got merit, it's got things going on. The second gameplay to me jumped it almost immediately to a 3.5, third gameplay to a 4. This is a game that, I don't remember exactly what my arc was when I first played this, but I remember game after game it improved for me. Game after game it got better until 4 or 5 games in, you're like, wow, look at look at all the things my hunters can do, my seekers can do as I go through the game, and look at how much agency I have of building up my encampment and getting extra things for them and choosing which abilities to unlock. There's so much more sense of control over things as you lean into it, and so I don't think it's a game you should grade off your first play. I think give it 2 minimum to get a sense of how things are going, and really at game 3 is where you'll start to shine a lot more. But Wild Assent just gives you a great skirmish game with tons of characters, tons of powers and abilities, a lot of rooms to be able to combine and feel powerful and feel strong as you take down a bunch of creatures who are fairly strong in return, and you need to work together as a cohesive group with your other players or seekers, depending if you're doing it solo or not, to be able to ultimately take things down, hunt, kill, capture as necessary, while you try to last across 10 rounds of play. And that is going to be my top 50 games of all time. With this video, we conclude the first half of the entire list, my top 50. We're done over here, and we'll be back soon with the continuation of the series with numbers 50 through 41. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.